right, welcome back to another episode of CGQ&A. I've got a bunch of questions from you guys here, but first I have a few things I want to talk about. First, this is the first episode of CGQ&A I've done since I released the last two launch videos, and it's actually been 6 months since I did a Q&A video. So I hope you guys like those launch videos. Big thanks to Paul Driscoll and Eric Fraga once again. And then, of course, earlier this week, I uploaded the magazine read-through, which I have a ton of fun making those, and I know that at least some of you enjoy watching them, so that's good enough for me. So just a quick update on the launch video front. The next launch video I'm going to do is going to be the Nintendo 64, which I know I already told you guys I was going to do that, and then I didn't, but I'm back working on that again. The reason I shelved it the first time around was that I was really trying to get it out in time for the anniversary of the launch of the N64, the 20-year anniversary. And at some point I figured out, or I realized that I was going to miss it. And so I just stopped and started working on something else instead. But I am back to work on that, which you would know if you followed me on Twitter. Next, I'm actually starting a second channel. Well, by the time you see this, I will have already started the second channel. And it's going to be called, or it is called, CGQ Plus. So it's just CGQ and the plus sign. And thanks to Alex Mort from Retro Game Squad for coming up with the name. I couldn't think of anything. So basically what that's going to be is sort of like my experimental / unscripted channel. I always have crazy ideas for videos, and I don't really feel like I can do them on this channel anymore. Like, this channel sort of has its style, and quite frankly, this channel has too many subscribers that I'm worried about angering. So I would rather have somewhere else that I can upload videos that maybe I think are not really something that people are going to enjoy if they're only here for the launch videos. So, but I think if you're watching this video, like if you normally watch like magazine read-throughs or like a Q&A video, you should check out the new channel. I think you're going to like it. I don't want to go into too much. I don't want to take up too much time in this video explaining what it's going to be. But one of the first things I'm going to start working on is I want to do like a series of videos where I kind of step through my gaming history. And so my idea was that like each episode I would talk about a game, and I'm going to try to put them in chronological order, but talk about a game that either I had or I didn't have but had like a big impact on me as a kid, and just talk about my memories with the game and maybe just other memories from around that time in my childhood. And then I'll actually play the game and talk about the game. So I guess kind of a let's play, but I mean, I would only be playing the game for as long as I had interesting things to say, and then I would probably shut it off. But I've never done that kind of content before. I hardly ever do this kind of content, even like talking to the camera just feels kind of weird because normally everything I do on the show is scripted. So anyway, that's just like one idea, but it's something I'm really excited about because one of the comments that I get on the magazine read-throughs is sort of people asking me to share more of like my memories. Because I think with content like that, it's not so much that it's about me and people wanting to hear my memories, but I think that when you hear somebody else like waxing nostalgic about their childhood, it kind of helps you do the same with yours. Like, it sends you on your own little nostalgia trip because maybe I'll say things that you can relate to from your own childhood. So so this isn't like some ego thing from me where, oh, everybody wants to hear about my gaming history, but it's the kind of content I enjoy watching. So I'm going to do that. But I've got other ideas. Like, I'm probably going to start doing these Q&A videos over on CGQ Plus, just because I think, like I said, I hope those of you who enjoy this kind of stuff just follow me over there, and then I'll stop putting them up here because I think that, you know, this channel has something like not quite 50,000 yet subscribers, and at least 40 of those are really just here for launch videos. And so I don't really want to start flooding people's subscription feeds with like things that they don't want to see, or, you know, I worry people are going to unsubscribe. I think I worry about that stuff way too much, especially since this channel is just my hobby. I really kind of shouldn't care, but I can't help it. I do. So anyway, so CGQ Plus, I'll put a link down in the video description. Go check it out. By the time I upload this, I will have uploaded 1 or 2 videos to that, so that when you go over there, there's at least something to watch. And then lastly, sorry, I can't really see without my Patreon. So I don't want to say people keep asking me, but I get regularly asked if I have Patreon or asking me to start one because they would like to contribute. And first of all, I really appreciate that. That anybody watches the stuff I'm making and wants to give me money, I think is really, really cool. And I just appreciate the support that I get from a lot of you guys. The thing with Patreon, like I'm not criticizing anybody who takes Patreon. Like it's totally, is it Patreon or Patreon? I feel like it should be Patreon, but I've always said Patreon. Money is not the reason that I don't create shows more often than I do. And I could start taking money from you guys, but it wouldn't really change the channel in any way. And so I would really feel like I was just taking advantage of my audience if I accepted your money. Like I'm not asking anybody to pay me to make this stuff. The channel makes enough money just from AdSense revenue, like Google ad revenue, that at this point, if I need something, for the channel, I can get it. Like if I need to buy a game or I need to buy like a microphone stand or whatever else, like we have the money now. We're not rich over here, trust me, but sometimes we have good months, like the Super Nintendo episode did really well. And so we made some money, and, the only reason I don't really ever talk about it is I don't want to seem like I'm bragging, like I was able to buy a new camera, a while back for the show. And one of the first things I thought about doing was I wanted to create like a video just to say thank you to everybody, because of you guys watching the show and supporting the show and sharing it and leaving comments and sort of helping the show in the YouTube algorithm. We have the money to buy stuff like that now, but it just it felt like it would have been like braggy, and I don't want to come off that way. It's like the same reason I don't do like game room tour stuff is I don't want it to ever seem like I'm showing off. So that's why I hadn't brought that up. But so going back to the Patreon thing, like I said, it really means a lot to me, honestly, that there's so many people that ask about it. And I'm not saying that there might not be a time in the future when I might not do something like that, but it would have to be because a lack of money was stopping me from doing something with the show that I wanted to do, which right now is definitely not the case. So that's really all I have to say about Patreon. That's it. So I guess we're going to kind of move on to questions. Bill Hyman on Facebook asks, how about a tour of your gaming setup? It is really hard to read this without my glasses on. Thanks for the question, Bill. That's the kind of thing that I might do over on the other channel, but it would have to be split up into chunks because I don't know how long this video is already, but once I start talking, sometimes I can't stop. And I feel like if I really wanted to give someone like a thorough, tour or whatever, or walkthrough of all my stuff, I could talk for like 4 hours easy. And so it'd be the kind of thing where maybe I would break it up into chunks and I could just do a video and say, hey, like today we're going to take a look at all of my Genesis stuff or something, because like there's no point in showing you my games if I'm not going to talk about them. Like a pet peeve of mine actually is like people who take out all their games, like they'll take out all their Nintendo games and they'll spread them out on the floor and take a picture and like post it on Reddit. And there's no text to go along with it. Like there's no context. And it's just like, oh, here's my Nintendo collection. And it's like, what are you showing me? And what I would rather is if somebody was going to make a post like that on Reddit or Twitter or wherever else, is just to say, here's my collection, and like maybe here's a quick story of how I got into playing Nintendo. Like, have you been playing it since you were a kid, or did you just get into it as an adult, and why? And like, what are some of your favorite games, or what are some games you think are overrated, or whatever. So anyway, that being the case, if I was ever going to do like a collection tour or whatever, the point in doing it for me would be to talk about the games and like why I own particular games that I own, like, for example, like why do I own Time Tracks for the Super Nintendo? So I might like to do something like that, but like I said, it would be over on the other channel. Kelly Herbert, or A-Bear, I don't know which, on YouTube asks, what does the CA hat stand for? And that would, of course, be the hat that I'm wearing right now. CA is, well, it's two things. It's the California Aggies, which is the mascot of the college I went to, but it's also my initials. So that's kind of why I bought the hat. It's like a twofer. I actually have about 5 of these hats. And actually this one I only wear on the show because I don't want it to get like worn out or, get sweaty or whatever. So this one like is on my shelf with my game consoles, and I only take it down when I record the show, and then I put it back. Next question comes from someone called Death Mountaineers on YouTube. They ask, or he asks, what game, if any, were you most excited for pre-release? And I thought about that one for a while, and I could name off a bunch of games, but the first game that comes to mind that I was really excited for pre-release was Final Fantasy VIII. And that was because I just loved Final Fantasy VII so much. It was one of the very first games that I got for the PlayStation, and it was really the first role-playing game that I ever really got into. Like, I had the original Final Fantasy back in the day, but I got like a used copy, and so I didn't have the instruction manual or anything, and I'd never played a Japanese RPG before, I don't think, and I just didn't get it. Like, I didn't know what to do, and so I just ended up taking the game and just sticking it on the shelf because I kind of gave up, which I know is lame, but I didn't have access to like game magazines or books or anything because I just didn't have a lot of money. And so anyway, and then I didn't have a Super Nintendo back in the day, so I never played Final Fantasy 2 or 3 at that time. And so Final Fantasy 7 was really the first Final Fantasy that I got into, and I only bought it because I had a friend who like browbeat me into buying it. Just because it wasn't really the kind of thing I was into at the time, but he's like, oh, you got to get Final Fantasy 7. And so I ended up getting it, and I just fell in love with it. And so, long story short, when Final Fantasy VIII was coming out, I had my subscription to PSM, so I was reading all the previews about Final Fantasy VIII, and I was really excited for that game. And I bought it like day one when it came out, and I really tried to get into that game, and I just couldn't. So I'm one of those guys who doesn't like Final Fantasy VIII. I do still have it because I would like to give it another try at some point, maybe when I'm feeling less salty about it not living up to Final Fantasy VII, in my opinion. Jeff Vieira on Facebook asks, what are your thoughts on the Sega CD? That's kind of a big question, Jeff. You don't really ask, but, what I thought of it back, or what I would have thought of it back then and what I think of it now are two different things. As far as what I think of it now, I think the Sega CD is awesome. And if you're a Genesis fan like I am, you should definitely get a Sega CD. Like, I have no idea what a Sega CD sells for now. I'm always surprised how much everything sells for now. When someone tells me like, oh, you have that? Do you know how much that's worth? No, I don't know how much it's worth. So I'm telling you to buy a Sega CD and maybe it's not a reasonable purchase. I have no idea. I love the Sega CD. It's got a ton of cool games on it. Sonic. I love Sonic CD. Terminator, lots of Working Designs games like Pop Full Mail, and of course that's where the Lunar games were originally, although like I said, I have them on the PlayStation now. Of course, the Sega CD version of NHL 94, which in my opinion is the best version of NHL 94, only because, they're both worthless pretty much, right? How much does a copy of NHL 94 go for? So if you have a Sega CD, then you might as well buy that one. As far as what maybe I thought about the Sega CD in its own time, my main question about it is just like, who is it really, who is its target audience? Who is it really aimed at? The Genesis was really marketed towards teenagers, people who grew up playing the NES and wanted a console that was a little bit more grown up, or, whatever that means. But, people like me, like I was 15 when I got my Genesis, and I didn't have $300. So I don't, I saw the Sega CD, but I knew that was never going to happen. 300 might as well have been 3,000. I wasn't getting that. So I'm not sure who was supposed to buy that. Rich kids, I guess, or gamers that were adults. And people, I feel like a lot of people consider the Sega CD to be a failed console. And I'd be really curious to ask like Tom Kalinske or Al Nilsson what they think about that, because I wonder what their expectations were as far as sales numbers go, because they had to know that it wasn't going to sell in like a 1-to-1 ratio with the Genesis just because it was so expensive. But I really don't know how many of those consoles did sell. It was successful enough that they redesigned it and kept selling it. If it had been a complete flop, like I think a lot of people assume, then they never would have made a Sega CD Model 2, right? I guess. So I don't know. But bottom line, I like the Sega CD, and if you don't have one, you should get one, unless it's too expensive. Next question comes from Bill Hyman again. So he snuck two in on me. This is a good question, though. He says, what consoles do you not have that you would like to? I can think of two, and one of them I used to own and sold it, and one of them I've never owned. So I think about 2007, I actually sold off a lot of my stuff. I used to be one of these collectors that anytime, getting old, anytime I went out to like thrift stores or flea markets or yard sales and I saw games that I didn't have, I would buy them. Because back then everything was just so cheap. So that was an excuse, like, oh, there's a game I don't have, I would just buy it. And so I just had all this stuff piling up everywhere. And at some point it just got to be too much, like there was stacks of stuff under my desk and there was stuff all over the floor and the closet was totally packed full. I had bigger shelves, like this shelf is like a media shelf that's meant to hold this kind of stuff. But I used to have like normal bookshelves and the stuff was in there like too deep. And it was just too much. And I also wanted some money for something else. I wanted to buy an engagement ring for well, now she's my wife, right? But she was my girlfriend at the time. And so for both of those reasons together, I decided it was time to sell off a bunch of stuff. And something ended up becoming available for me to buy that I'd been looking for a long time. It was something that was only like tangentially game related. It was a sound card for a computer, but it was complete in the box, and it was the sound card that I had mowed lawns and dug ditches all summer in like 1992 or 93 to buy. And anyway, one became available for sale. It was still complete in the box and everything, and I really wanted it. But the guy wanted like $300 for it, shipped. And he was in Germany, so a lot of that was the shipping. And but I didn't want to spend the money that I was raising selling my stuff because, I was going to use that for something else. And so the only thing that I had that I'd kind of been on the fence about selling was my Vectrex. And I had a Vectrex with, 8 or 10 games, and I had the overlays for most of them. And the Vectrex is one of those systems, like it's really cool to have. You have it on like a side table or something in your game room, and it looks really cool. And every once in a while you fire it up and play some Mindstorm or something. But I wanted the $300 and I wanted the Gravis Ultrasound more than I wanted the Vectrex. And so I sold my Vectrex collection for $300, which at the time was a fair price. Like now, I'm sure somebody heard me say that and was like, oh, because now I don't know how much all that stuff would be worth, but certainly more than $300. So I think you're going to spend at least $2 just on a Vectrex, right? I really don't know. But I'm not going to say I regret selling it because I still have the ultrasound and that's like a piece of my childhood. And so it's more valuable to me than the Vectrex was, which I think I only ever saw once when I was a kid. But I do miss having a Vectrex, and so I'd like to have one again. So that's part A. Answer part A is Vectrex. The other thing, or the other console that I would really like to have that I've never owned is an Intellivision. And I had a ColecoVision for a while, and I ended up selling that, back in 2007, and I don't really miss it. The ColecoVision was a cool console, and it had good graphics for the time, but I just hate those controllers. And I know the Intellivision has similar controller. And by the way, I know the Intellivision and ColecoVision weren't made by the same company, so I don't want someone to leave a comment. But anyway, I'm just talking about systems that I had from that era. I have an Atari, and I've had an Atari for a long time, and I had the Coleco for a while, but I've never had an Intellivision. And there's some cool games in the Intellivision I'd like to play, like Shark's a cool game, and there was an Advanced Dungeons and Dragons game that'd be cool to check out, and Major League Baseball looks pretty cool. And there's Utopia, I'd like to check out Utopia. But there's a lot of other games on the Intellivision that I'm not popping into my head right now, but that I'd really like to check out. But I've never run across one, really, like thrift stores or anything else, or even game stores. Like, if I walked into a game store one day and they were selling like an Intellivision with a bunch of games for like, I don't know, 60, 70, 80 bucks, I'd probably buy it. The other problem is that I don't have a way anymore to play games that are, or to play systems that are RF only. Like my Atari is modded for composite video and S-video, but I guess I could bring up a VCR or something down out of the basement so I could play some Intellivision. But yeah, so that's the two, the Vectrex and the Intellivision. Zach Morosky on Facebook asks, what's your favorite console to collect for and why? So you're not asking what my favorite console is. You're asking what my favorite console is to collect for. That became more, this would be a harder question for me to answer if you'd asked me like several years ago. But, you know, with the advent of EverDrives, I can already play whatever I want, basically. So I don't need to really buy games anymore, although, I mean, I still do, but I'm a lot more picky now. And, but the one system that I really still enjoy buying games for is the Genesis. There's just something about like the clamshell case and like the cool artwork and everything. Like when I play a Genesis game on my EverDrive and I really like it, I want to get it. You know, I start looking on eBay or whatever because I want to have a copy of that for the game shelf. And then if I have the game, then I prefer to come over here and take the game down and actually play it. I know there's guys out there that like, you know, they don't want to play their games because they don't want to put wear and tear on them or whatever. And like, I don't do that. So if I own the game, I want to play it that way. It's like listening to records or something. I still like listening to records because I like going out and getting the record out and dusting it off and putting it on the turntable. And it's the same thing with these. But ever since I got EverDrives, like I hardly ever buy like a Nintendo game anymore or anything. I already have I mean, it's a small collection, but I like my collection of Nintendo games, and there's hardly any Nintendo games that I don't have that I want. In fact, off the top of my head, I really can't think of any. I mean, I'm sure there's a couple. It'd be cool to have like Contra Force or something, but as far as games from my childhood or just games that I think are really awesome, I think I pretty much have everything already. And then I do still buy any game that comes on optical media. I don't like putting burned games into like my Turbo Duo, just because, you know, I know there's two schools of thought out there, and some people think it's fine, and some people think it ruins the laser. I freely admit that I don't know, but it's not worth the risk, really. Especially like PlayStation games are cheap for the most part, and I already have most of the PlayStation games that I want. Sega CD, I have a Model 1 Sega CD, and those things already have enough problems with reliability that I don't feel comfortable like jamming CDRs into it. So I do try to find like loose discs for the Sega CD. I don't know why with the Sega CD I don't mind loose discs. Like I would never buy a loose disc of like a PlayStation game. Or even probably like a PC Engine game. Like I want to have the jewel case and everything. But for some reason with Sega CD, maybe I don't really care for these gigantic jewel cases that the Sega CD came in. So I don't mind having just a loose disc, and it's way cheaper. So yeah, but that's not really for collection purposes. It's just that if I want to play the game, I want to have a proper pressed copy. Thank you for the question, Zach. The last question comes from Matt Johnson on Facebook, and he says, how about the Atari Jaguar? What did you think of it when it was released, and did you know anyone who had one when they were new? So those questions are kind of related because what did I think of it when it was released? Not too much, because I didn't know anybody that had one. But I'll tell you, I was going to say I'll quickly tell you my story, but it's probably not going to be quick. I'll tell you my story about the first time I saw a Jaguar, which was actually the last time I saw one for a long time, and then I'll tell you about how I actually finally got a Jaguar. So the Jaguar came out in, I believe it was November of '93, but I'm just going off memory. And sometime that fall or winter, I remember going with my mom to this store called The Good Guys. And if you grew up on like the West Coast, then you've probably heard of The Good Guys. It was like an electronics store, but it was just maybe like a little bit higher end than like Circuit City, but they also sold video games. And we went in there because my mom, I remember she was buying our first CD player, and they must have had it on sale there or something, because normally we wouldn't shop at The Good Guys because it was expensive. But anyway, we went over there, she was getting her CD player, and I didn't really care about that, so I went to check out the video games, obviously. And they had an Atari Jaguar demo kiosk set up. And I'm pretty sure I had never heard of the Atari Jaguar. Like, I didn't have money back then to buy like video game magazines. And plus, I just didn't want to read video game magazines because I didn't have money to buy games. And so, like, reading the magazines was just like torture. But so I didn't know about the Atari Jaguar. So I just saw it set up, and like, you know, anytime you'd go, even today, if I go to a store and they have a demo kiosk set up and nobody's playing it, I'm going to play it. And it was running Cybermorph. And at the time, I thought it was pretty cool. I was primarily, I've never really talked about this, but I'll get into it. I'll get into it on CGQ Plus when we go through all the games I used to play. I was primarily a PC gamer at that time. But I saw Cybermorph and I thought that looks pretty cool. You know, it was 3D, obviously. It was flat shaded polygons, and the frame rate I don't think was great. But I thought it was neat enough that I sat there and played it for 10 or 15 minutes and thought, like, you know, this would be kind of a cool system to have if I had any money, which of course I didn't. But plus I didn't care because I was going to go home and play, you know, like X-Wing and stuff on my computer. So, but I thought it was cool. That was, like I said, that was my first and last impression, really, of the Jaguar for quite a number of years. And then 1999, it was 1999, I walked into the store. We had this store in the town where I grew up called BRE Software. And I only mention it by name because if you read like GamePro or EGM back then, they were one of those businesses that would put those full page ads in the back of the magazines because they would buy and sell video games. But I didn't know that at the time. For me, it was just like this local place to go buy games. And so I go in there. It's like 1999, and I remember that against one wall, they had these two stacks of boxes, and there was a sign on the wall that said something to the effect of take your pick, $24.99. And one stack were brand new in the box 32X systems, and the other stack were brand new in the box Atari Jaguars. And I think in 1999, I think I was between Genesis systems, because in 97 I gave away my original Genesis, and I ended up buying one, but I think it wasn't until 2000. So I didn't have a Genesis, so I wasn't going to get the 32X, and I didn't really want one anyway. But I saw the Jaguar, and it immediately reminded me of that night at the Good Guys. So I bought one. I took it home, and I played Cybermorph, you know, for the weekend or whatever. And I remember thinking I wanted to check out some other games. I'd never played any other Jaguar games. And so I ended up going to this other like local game store, and I didn't see any Jaguar games out. And I ended up asking, and the guy he said like, well, I'll go look in the back, like what do you want Jaguar games for? So I'll go look in the back. And he ends up going in the back, and he comes back out, and he has one game, and it was Evolution Dino Dudes, which meant nothing to me. But he wanted like $4 for it, and I said, fine. I gave him the $4, and it didn't come with the manual or anything, and I took it home, and I popped it into the Jaguar, and I tried playing it, but it's kind of one of those games where if you don't know what to do, you don't know what to do. Without the manual, there was just like four guys standing on the screen, and what am I supposed to do? I didn't realize what the premise of the game was, and I don't know if I could have looked on the internet in 1999 or not. Now it'd be easy, right? You just go to GameFAQs or something. But back then, I kind of was trying to play it and was like, I just don't get it. And so I gave up, and I was kind of done playing Cybermorph. So I remember that I took the whole Jaguar and I just put it back in the box the way it was, and just put it on a shelf. And this is when I was still living at home. So I was 22 and I was going to community college, and I was getting ready to go off to university, move away to go to university. And when I ended up doing that, I just left the Jaguar at home in my old room because I didn't want it. And just as sort of a conclusion to that story, I did end up trading that Jaguar to somebody for a complete in the box TurboGrafx 16. And that was my first TurboGrafx 16. So which I ended up, sort of by extension getting for $25. So that was pretty cool. But anyway, that was a long-winded answer. So that's the story of the Jaguar. Do I think it's a cool system? Maybe. Obviously I appreciate game history, and a game doesn't have to be good for me to sort of enjoy it or to enjoy trying it at least. So I like owning a Jaguar and taking it out and playing it every once in a while because, when the Jaguar came out, that was 93 and it was pretty cool, I think, at the time. It was pretty advanced. And there are some good games on the Jaguar. The problem with the Jaguar is that most of the games on it that are good came out on other systems. Someone can mention like Rayman, for instance, or it had a really good version of Raiden, but both of those ended up coming out on the PlayStation at launch. And Alien versus Predator, but who wants to play that anymore? It's like playing GoldenEye on the N64. Like, yeah, it was fun back then, but now it just looks horrible. But so the one game that people always try to like Jaguar apologists, if you want to call them that, the one game they always point to is Tempest 2000, because that game, I know it came out on the computer, but I don't think it ever came out on any other home console. And if you have, which I don't, but if you have the rotary controller, then it's really cool. But that's not really, in my opinion, a reason to own the Jaguar. I would say if you're like me and if you really appreciate video game history and you can try to appreciate games in their own time, then the Jaguar is cool to own. But if you're just someone who's looking for some cool games to play, the Jaguar is definitely skippable. Buy a Sega CD instead. That's what I would say. So that's it. I'm out of questions. So that's going to do it for this episode of CGQ&A. Remember that subsequent episodes of CGQ&A will be on CGQ Plus. I'm saying CGQ a lot, which again, there's a link to that channel down in the video description. So go there and check it out. Hopefully some of you guys are going to follow me over there. Well, the next launch episode will be the Nintendo 64 launch. I'm almost positive that's not going to be the next episode of this show. I'm going to do at least one magazine read through. I got quite a bit of good feedback off of the last magazine read through, and several people sort of took me up on my offer to do a read through of a Mega Play. And in fact, they wanted me to do a read through of the Mega Play that I showed on the screen, which had Streets of Rage on the cover. And I pulled that magazine out and started flipping through it, and it's a good issue. Like, there's a ton of awesome games in there. So it's going to take me a while to make that because I don't have it within arm's reach. But I made a list of all the games that I'm going to have to record gameplay footage for that read through, and I think it's about 25 games. But there's just so much cool stuff going on in that issue that I want to do that read through. So. Hopefully I can get that done like in a week or something, but who knows. But that'll be the next episode of Classic Gaming Quarterly. But the Nintendo 64 launch is coming soon, and like I said, it will be the next launch episode. But I'm also going to start working on some videos for CGQ Plus, so definitely go check that out. As always, thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.